fellow Toastmasters and distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And as we start, I think we can all probably relate. There's moments in our lives where we know whatever we're involved in or whatever's happening to us, it's going to change our life forever. Something that you know you'll never be the same again. Well, one of mine was the first time I held my oldest child. And I still remember holding that little bundle of flesh and joy and fat. And I just was in love, and at the same time I was like, holy smoke, I'm now responsible for this life. What's going to happen? And from that very moment, and I think all parents are the same, whether you want to or not, you begin to have hopes and dreams for that child. And it starts with the naming. We kind of pick a name, and are they going to be made fun of? Is this going to help them? What's it going to be? We chose to name her Abby. Not Abigail, Abby. We chose that name for a couple of reasons. One, everyone that I had ever known named Abby laughed a lot and was full of joy. And I thought, I can think of nothing better for my child than if they brought joy into the world and that they had lots of laughter and they enjoyed it and they were happy. So I said, I like Abby, that's a good one. But it also didn't hurt that the name Abby means Father's delight. And she was definitely my delight. And as she grew, like all parents, you begin to notice little elements and characteristics of your children, and your hopes and dreams begin to take shape depending on what you see. Unfortunately, Abby was the perfect little girl. I mean, in every way, shape, and possible. Never gave us hardly any trouble. She did give her teachers a few bits of trouble, but that's because she was very independent-minded, creative, always went to the beat of her own drum, which personally we like. So I thought that she was perfect just like she was. She kind of grew up, got into high school. At the end of high school, she said, Dad, I don't want to go to college right away. I want to take a couple of years off, and I want to go to Europe. And I personally thought that's a great idea. So she figured out how to get the money. She went to Europe for a few months. She came back and started school when she was 20. She got a scholarship at the school she wanted to go to. She now lives in New York City, which is where she wanted to live. But everything is perfect. She's there. She's studying environmental science. Everything's wonderful. She comes home after the first semester of school, and she says, okay, I have found the surgeon that I need for my breast reduction surgery. And let me back up a little bit. I didn't tell you that from the time she was 17 till 20, she had said, Dad, I really want to get breast reduction surgery. Now, to be fair, she was developed quite well endowed, and she was having back pain, and like all parents, it's one of those things where I go, that's cool, but I don't do anything about it because I know I kind of put it off and put it off. And parents, we've all had those things where we're okay with whatever it is the kid wants, but we just don't want it just yet. So we just kind of bury our head in the sands and ignore it for a little while. So that's what I did. So she went to college. I hadn't done a thing about it. She comes back and she goes, I found the surgeon. He's in San Francisco. He takes our insurance. I've already done 2 video consults. I've been approved, and I have a surgery date for November.
Wow.
Now, I have to be honest with you. I was actually quite impressed. I was proud of her. She wanted it bad enough that she put the work in to figure it all out. And so I said, great, that's wonderful. She'd even figured out the pre and post-op, everything. Super. So she goes, she's getting ready for the surgeon. I said, you know, I got to pay the bill. There's going to be a little bit of a bill here, so I need the information for the doctor. So she sent it to me. I contacted him, and I had him send me the invoice. And I get the invoice, and it says, transgendered chest surgery. I went, what? Transgender chest surgery. I thought I was getting a breast reduction surgery. Something's wrong. Well, now that's when I realized, oh, we need to have a conversation. So I contacted her and I said, so what's going on? This says transgender. She goes, oh, I thought you knew I'm non-binary and genderqueer. I don't know if you even know what that means. Most people don't. Non-binary essentially means that I have gender dysphoria about whatever it is, let's say physically female, but I don't really identify as male either. And sexually, can go male or female, so it's kind of this in-between thing. Now, I'm of a generation, and probably most of us are in here, where we grew up when it comes to gender in a very black and white world. Whether it really was or not is irrelevant. That's the world that we grew up in, that's how we thought, that's how our brains were wired. She goes, oh, I'm non-binary. Now, I told her right away, I don't care. You're my kid. I've got your back. I've always told you I've got your back. I'm with you. I love you. We're there. But it also was a little more difficult for me to wrap my head around non-binary than I actually thought. Now, you have to understand, I have a master's in psychology, and I've done quite a bit of research in human gender and sexuality and relationships, and I thought, well, this will be pretty easy. I can deal with this. It was a little more difficult than I thought. And there were signs. She had begun to use different names. At the school, she had changed all her names to Andy, A-N-D-I-E, instead of Abby. All her friends had called her Andy for a while. And honestly, you know, we don't get to choose our names. They're chosen for us and given. And I'm like, if you want to change your name, I'm cool with that. You know, I gave you the name, but it was a little harder as a parent than I thought to call her Andy instead of Abby. Because Abby's my girl. Andy, oh, it really took me about a year. to adjust, but I tried. But in the process, I started to learn and research. And as I told you, I have a master's in psychology, so things like this I really get into. I'm going to really learn and understand. And I have. And tonight I want to share with you some of the things that really may challenge you and surprise you that I have learned about gender and the black and white world of male and female that we think we live in. Now, everybody defines themselves, for the most part, if you're over the age of probably 25, as male or female. And when you look at somebody the first time or the 100th time you meet them, you automatically, in an unconscious way, determine which box they fit into, male or female. And once you determine that, you actually then begin to change your body language, your voice, your tone, everything, depending on whether you think they're male or female. And it's different. Female to females, change everything. Male to male, male to female, female to male. And so from the time we're this big, we're conditioned to put people in that box and then respond to them. And most of the time we're unconscious. We don't realize that we're doing it. But if you meet, if I'm a woman and I meet a woman for the first time, I'm going to respond differently than when I meet a man for the first time, regardless of whether I know that person or not. And so when we're forced to think or act or think through somebody who doesn't fit into that gender mold, it tends to throw us for a loop because we're not sure what to do with it. The other problem is that more than I think we want to admit, we get a lot of our security from our gender, right? Sisterhood, the brotherhood, that's kind of who I am, that's the tribe I belong to. Wait a minute, here's a person who doesn't seem to belong to that tribe, or is switching tribes, or what's going on? And I think that ignorance of understanding the full structure of gender is what often causes people to have hatred and anger, and all the stuff that we see is not that they are really mad at that person. They just don't understand, and it's threatening something that is dear to their security. We live in a black and white world, but I believe color is coming, and I actually think it's already there. If you think of an Ansel Adams print, and behind the rocks and the trees, there's some color. I remember I saw this movie, it was probably 10, 15 years ago, and it was a black and white movie, kind of like set in the Leave It to Beaver, 50s type feel. Everybody's in black and white, and all of a sudden this character comes into the movie, and she's in color. And everything's black and white, and she's in color, walking on through, and people are going, what a freak! Something's wrong, that's danger, danger, there's color coming into our black and white world. And as the movie progresses, things that she touches and interacts with turn to color. And of course, you know, it's a movie. By the end of the movie, everybody is rejoicing because they're all starting to add color to their clothes and their skin, and everything's going to be great, and everybody was happy at the end, and it ended as a color movie. Well, I think we live in a black and white world. We've learned to be that way with just male and female, regardless of the fact that history tells us there have been a lot of people who really didn't fit in that black and white world, but they weren't allowed to really admit that. And so we just assumed it was all that way. But color is coming, and with the younger generations, it's coming even faster. And the more people feel like it's okay to be themselves, I think you're going to see a lot more purples and pinks and greens and all kinds of fuchsias and other colors. And this isn't new. Did you know there was a time where if you had red hair, you were actually considered immoral and bad and almost demonic? People would see you with red hair and go, that's not right. Something's wrong with you because you have red hair. Now today we think that's so silly. But that was a real thing. People were killed because they had red hair. The same thing used to be done with people who were left-handed. I've actually heard somebody use the Bible to defend the fact, or actually I read it, that if you're left-handed, you are not of God. All right? And the Bible actually speaks to that a little bit about people who are left-handed. Well, today we kind of know. We have medicine and science, and we've evolved, and we know how silly that is. And there might even be some left-handed people here today. You're not evil, you're fine, don't worry about it. There's all kinds of things throughout the history of people and of the world where we had to evolve and learn a little something before we realized that it's okay. And before we did that, we were ignorant to it and often responded in inappropriate ways. But nature and science and medicine shows us a different route when it comes to gender. And this is some of the stuff that has surprised me and really opened up my own mind, and I hope it opens up yours. Now, in nature, I look at nature and I go, okay, this is God's perfect creation. It's here. You would be amazed at how many animals in nature switch genders or have both genders within the same. I was. Did you know that the clownfish actually switches gender? So clownfish are usually run by a dominant female. But when she dies, the dominant male changes gender and begins to lead the group of clownfish. And this is an anomaly. This is a regular occurrence in nature. Frogs, moray eels, slugs, and bearded dragons all change gender at various times. Cardinals, now I didn't know this, I thought this was crazy. Cardinals actually often have both genders at the same time. It's kind of crazy. So in nature, in the world that we live in, it's actually not that uncommon that things can change genders. It's just kind of new to us because these are newer discoveries. Now let's talk about science. The World Health Organization, UCLA, Harvard, Scientific America, and a handful of others in the last 10 to 15 years have been doing some groundbreaking work in the area of gender and what does it mean to really be male or female. And one of the things that they've discovered is that gender is not as simple as XX and XY like we used to think. Because it's kind of like, let's say you had a microscope and you look through and you go, yep, XX, XY, that's it. But then you get a more powerful microscope. And you look deeper into the XX and the XY and you realize, oh, there's a lot of variance in there. And wait a minute, there's some like quarter-Ys and half-Ys in the XX. And it's more of a continuum than simply male and female. And we know this. We all know people who fall different levels of the continuum. Men that maybe don't seem as manly, or women that may be a little bit more masculine, and that's a normal thing. But honestly, historically, at least in our country, they've kind of been shunned if you don't fit neatly in a nice little box. Now, from a medical standpoint, I want to introduce you to somebody by the name of Dr. William Powers. I'm amazed at the work that this man is doing. He's a doctor who treats, not by his choice actually in the beginning, he treats exclusively transgendered patients. He's seen over 1,500 transgendered patients and on the gender binary, and he has a waiting list of about 300 people. And he has done some groundbreaking work. And he didn't start out this way. He was in his residency and somebody came to him and said, hey, my brother is struggling with this, will you treat them? And he's like, sure, what the heck? So he gets into it and he starts to realize that it's a very underserved community and that there's so much research that hasn't been done. And he's one of these like just brilliant people that the moment he gets onto something, he goes after it. And the things that he has learned has blown my mind. One of the things is the cause of why somebody might be somewhere on the gender continuum or even want to change their gender. Did you know that when a baby is in utero, the liver has a certain thing that allows it to either fend off or accept different hormones that it gets from the mother. So specifically, with somebody who would be male to female transgender, what happens is they're in the mother's belly, and all of a sudden they're getting bathed with all of these estrogen hormones. Now they have a physical male body, but the liver doesn't have the little thing that causes it to go, nope, nope, I don't want all this estrogen. So for 9 months, what do you think happens? They're bathed in estrogen for 9 months. So they come out with a physical male body, but a female brain and spirit. So now this person has to live in a world that's black and white. What do you think happens? Probably a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of where do I fit in? Let me hide this. And this actually happens more times than you think. Probably I would estimate 5 to 7% of people have something like this happen in their life. Now he lists about 10 other different reasons why people fall different areas on the gender spectrum that he's researched. But one of the things that I found to be really interesting is he says that 100% of the time, when he puts his patients in an MRI machine, and let's say it's a female to male, body goes in, it's female. 100% of the time, the MRI comes back and says that's a male brain. And vice versa. Male to female. Goes in, male body. 100% of the time, the MRI says that's a female brain. So something's going on there. Nature's a little more wild and woolly than we might think. And maybe, as the World Psychological Organization has come to recently determine, they're not crazy. There's actually something going on. It kind of makes you crazy if you have to live in a black and white world and you're full of color. That's why, by the way, people within the transgender community have a suicide rate of 45%. It's larger than any other category because they're having to fit square pegs into round holes, and some people just can't deal with that. In fact, almost half. And those who can deal with it still live with a constant anxiety and stress. Also, historically, the gender binary has not always been that simple. I've done some research, and throughout history, from the beginning of time, there have been indigenous cultures throughout our world who have not strictly defined gender as male and female, both in North America with some of the Native American tribes, as well as Africa and Asia. In fact, some even had as many as 5 different classifications for gender. And often those who kind of blurred the line of gender were the ones that they saw as their shaman or their teachers, their spiritual teachers, were more wise. So historically, there's actually a track record that individuals who kind of blur the lines of this black and white gender binary have always been around. Let me show you a quote here, and you're going to find, you might find this funny or depressing, I'm not sure which. In 1895, there was an article in Scientific America that was written by a French surgeon who said this. By the way, the title of it was Women and the Wheel, talking about the sewing machine. And he was raising the question of whether women should be allowed to ride bicycles for their physical health. After all, the article concluded the muscular exertion required is quite different from that which is needed to operate a sewing machine. This is in Scientific America, where they're questioning whether women have the ability to really ride a bicycle because they're really more geared towards operating a sewing machine. Now today we kind of laugh at that. We go, what crazy. But this was real. This was science. This is a major science article. And over the last 50 to 100 years, we have expanded how we define female, have we not? Right? There was a time where if you have, ladies, if you have pants on, you would be shunned. And that's not the case anymore. Women can be, there's a broad breadth of how women can be. Now, unfortunately for men, it's very tight. There's not been much there. And most men, if you grew up male from the time you were this, you knew that if you didn't fit in that tight little male definition of gender, things were not going to go very well for you. But for women, it's expanded, and I would argue that that's a good thing for our society. That that's been a wonderful thing for our society, to allow women to just be themselves wherever they happen to be, whatever they happen to like. And I would also argue that we ought to allow more color in our black and white world. And it is my hope that I can encourage you tonight, from my own life-altering experience with my child, and from what I've learned, that you can embrace the fact that life is always evolving. From the beginning of time, it's always evolving. We're always learning new things and having to go, wait a minute, what I thought I knew, I wasn't right. So now I have to adjust a little bit. We should encourage more color in our world. We should welcome it. Even if you really like your monochromatic black and white world, that's cool. But when you see somebody who would represent the pink and the purple and the green and the fuchsia, it is my hope that you would offer kindness and support and love to encourage more color next to your Ansel Adams print of beautiful black and white. So I say, let's throw out the little 4-pack of crayons we got at Denny's. And let's bring on the 64-pack and the 128-pack, and let's color a little bit more, and it's okay to invite that into our worlds. Thank you.